So hi, I hope everybody is well. I can see people are logging in, which is great. I'll give everyone a few minutes. I'm just going to presenter mode again. One of the quirks of GoToWebinar on a Mac is that every time I click on the toolbar, it throws me out of presenter mode, which is good fun. So I hope everybody is well. And I'm just going to check the technology a little bit. So if somebody would be really kind and just say a quick hello in the chat box, and if somebody would be really kind and say hello in the question box, and also if you can see me on video. Hello. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Carl. Brilliant. Awesome. Can we just check the chat box, see if that's gone? Hello. You see the video? Brilliant. Awesome. Happy days. So hope everyone's well. Strange times we live in, huh? So I thought I would just, this is really just putting stuff out in the universe because it's a good thing to do. All of us are in this kind of strange situation of being in lockdown, and we do have people joining us from around Europe, from what I've seen, and also some of our friends in the States as well. And so I thought we might as well use our collective wisdom. There's a lot of good people here. So hello. I think we'll use the questions box on this webinar mainly for throwing in your pearls of wisdom. So there is a chat box on the right hand side, but don't worry if it's not showing up bizarrely. What we'll do, Simon, is we'll just use the question box for any observations. What I'm hoping as well is, rather than me blabbering on for an hour, is that if you have any pearls of wisdom, can you throw them in? Because everybody, I'm sure, would appreciate it, which would be great. So technology is good, which is great. It's 12:30 now. I won't kick off just yet because for some people, they have to download the app first before they can get cracking. So while I have everybody, a little bit about me. So, gosh, I've been delivering stuff virtually now for, I would say, nearly 16 years. So previous to being the head of business performance for RadTech, built a couple of my own businesses, and they were pretty much designed around, the delivery of value virtually. So the first one was an online learning business, and the second one was a cloud-based system for independent vet practices, both seven-figure businesses that we built. But even with that cloud-based system, we did virtual coaching. So we called them virtual practice managers, and the team delivered coaching to actual veterinary teams scattered all across Australia. And that's kind of the key thing. Australia being such a huge country, the only way you could get stuff done well often was through virtual delivery. So the goal today really is to share a lot of science, but in a very practical way. I'm going to stick with fundamentals rather than delve into the detail. Hello. And the reason for that is because I think with anything like this, when we're in a sort of new situation, let's get the fundamentals handled first, and then further down the track, we can jump into details if you find this is of value. So I'm going to crack on because I can see we've got a big list of attendees. We are pretty much a full house. So let's get going. All right. So firstly, in terms of our agreements, what I thought I would say is just a couple of things. If you've got any connected technology, turn them off. This is a really good opportunity to stay focused. The second one is please have fun and participate. This is not a formal training program in any way, shape, or form. I love the fact that I can see who you are, and I can see, the conversations in the question box. So for anyone who's arrived just recently, we're going to use the question box as our conversation starter. And every now and then, with your permission, I may unmute you just to have a conversation. Share any pearls of wisdom, as I said earlier. 80% rule applies. This is human science. So there's no such thing as 100% of things. apply to 100% of people 100% of the time. So if there's something that doesn't resonate with you, that's totally fine. But just don't get stuck there. Just keep going with us, because I'm sure there'll be other things that we all share that will be of value. The big message today is, although I'll go through a lot of stuff, what I'd ask is please just take away one thing and try it one at a time. That's to do with habit science, that if we try and bring in more than one new thing into our routine, our chances of success depreciate enormously. And then finally, no such thing as a dumb question. So please ask questions. It's really important. And often what I find is the people who are asking the question are asking the kind of question that everybody else had in their head. So just very quickly, in terms of context, the way the world is now is there's a big shift. And this was already occurring before the coronavirus came, but there's a deeper understanding that organizations aren't mechanistic. So this Taylor-esque view that organizations are like some great machine is not true. They're more like networks of interdependence. And our teams and our individuals are in these sort of relationships with other people, and they're emotionally contagious. Now, I thought I'd put a humorous spin on that. Peter Senge talks about human enacted interdependence. So even if an organization looked like this, like an org chart, there's still all of this stuff playing out, these sort of relationship stuff. Now, this is a slightly cynical view, I'll be honest. But, these relationships that we have are profoundly important. And I'm going to go into that in more detail. So organizations are not mechanistic, they're organic. There are a series of relationships between teams, between individuals, between senior leaders and middle-level leaders, and so on and so forth. And those relationships and how that network health has a profound impact on tangible outcomes. And we've all experienced that. We've all been in teams that have been awesome and have been able to do amazing things. We've all been in teams that are dysfunctional and have been not so great to be around. So I thought I'd start with a quick quiz, just to have a little bit of fun. So the first question I had was, as a percentage of body weight, how much do you think the brain weighs? So do you think the brain weighs 2% of the overall body weight, 9% of our overall body weight, etc.? So put your answer in the question box, confusingly, and let's see what people think. So do you think our brain weighs 2%, 9%, 15%, 20, 25%? So there's a question box on the right-hand side. So let's see what people think. Oh, look at this. Yeah, we've got 15 nines. Okay, so there are, from what I've seen, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. So we've got 4 people who've got it right, and it's 2%. Can you believe it? So our brain weighs 2% of our overall body weight. Now, next question. So that was great. Thanks very much for putting in your answer into the questions box, keeping you on your toes there. So the next question is, how much energy does it consume? So let's say the body assumes 100% energy, right? It consumes 100% energy. How much does the brain consume of overall body energy? Does it consume 2% of our energy, 9%, 15%, 20% of our energy, 25%? So have a wee guess. I can see the answers coming in. Wet or dry? Definitely dry. So thanks for that, David. Okay, so we've got, yeah, good. We've got 25s and 15s and 20s and brilliant. Okay, this is awesome. Lots of people saying 25%. You're all wrong. It's 20%. So brilliant. Okay, great start. Now, why am I asking this question? Well, the answer is that one of the things we've learned from social cognitive neuroscience is that the brain devotes an enormous amount of its time to the social world. So there is what a chap called Matthew Lieberman calls a default network. And what that means is that when we're not focused on a cognitive task, there's a part of the brain that lights up every time. And that part maps nearly entirely to the social brain, our social world. Why is that? And what Matthew talks about in his book Social is that it turns out that our social connection is a survival need more than food and water, because as mammals, we are desperately dependent on a relationship to survive. You know, we do not get food and water if we don't have that relationship, particularly as human beings. So this is of monumental importance to everything that I talk about today. That without this social connection, without understanding the need that all of us as human beings have for trust and shared understanding, it's going to make running virtual teams much more difficult. Okay, so first things first, how to set team expectations, especially around behaviors. Now, one of the blind spots we have as human beings is we assume that others see the world that we do. And we do something called mind reading and mentalizing. We try and understand other people's emotional states and their mental states all of the time. The problem is we take for granted that that person may have a different behavioral framework than we do. So I've thought about this a lot, and I thought the easiest and simplest thing to do around trying to get people to coalesce around behaviors is give you something very, very simple that you could use tomorrow. And that is this. We call it a design team alliance. Many of you would have experienced this in training days and that kind of thing. But it's really a very simple question, okay? So the question goes like this. How do we wish to work with each other going forward? What behaviors are important to us? Now, there is a recording of this, which I'll send out at some point tomorrow. But if you want to, please scribble this question down. It seems on the face of it fairly straightforward, but remember, we make massive assumptions around behaviors, and often the friction that I see in teams or your frustrations, particularly when people are virtual, is around behavior. So we've got to deal with these foundations first. Now, why does this question work? Firstly, it makes the unconscious conscious. Now, what I tend to do is I'll give people a starter to get the sort of brain cells ticking. I'll say something like, okay, how about we agree to have candor rather than brutal honesty? Now, that's important. Candor means we can be open and honest. Brutal honesty often means we do a lot of damage. So can we agree that that's an important behavior? And then you open it to the team. Now, so it firstly makes the unconscious conscious. Secondly, ensures there's a moral framework for the team wherever they are in the world. And we do have many different cultures often in our teams. The framework is co-created. This is profoundly important. And therefore, then you're not the owner as the leader. The team are the owner, and the team are also active in what I'll call policing around the behaviors, which is profoundly important. And then finally, it creates certainty. And that is exceptionally important for anyone who is in this present world that we're in right now. So that is your starter for 10, okay? How do we wish to work with each other going forward? What behaviors are important to us? Next, this is a simple way to create deep alignment. Now, this is from a chap called Tal Ben Shahar. Tal was at Harvard, taught positive psychology, and he taught me. He took us through this process, which was kind of mind-blowing, and I'm going to take you through it. And if you want, scribble this down, but you'll always have the video to come back to. I highly, highly recommend you run this with your teams. And if you're a team member, I highly, highly recommend you take ownership of this and, you know, run it with your leader and your teams as well. So think of two people you truly admire. They could be known to you or not, famous or not. Now, for me, my sister, my eldest sister, she's one of my heroes. So she's known to me, but she's not famous, obviously. And, you know, somebody else who I greatly admire is a guy called Dr. Fred Luskin. He's fairly well known in the area of psychology. He's an amazing guy. So they're two people. Now, it should only take 2 minutes for you to write down two people who you really love and admire. And then you write down 3 attributes for each of those 2 people that you really, really love, that really resonate with you. So for me, one of the things that I really love about my sister is how courageous she is. She was in the police for 16 years, and she was the first one to get in when they dropped the height restriction. She's quite tiny. She was first one in the traffic division. She's incredibly brave. Blah 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 blah. So courage is something that springs to mind. So get your teams. Spend about 10 minutes with this, but get your teams to do this and really think about it. Then you get them to share. All right. Now you're using Zoom, or Google Hangouts or whatever. They can just share openly with each other, and they listen to each other as they talk about the individuals and what they've written down about the attributes. And as the team members listen, if any other attribute that's spoken about resonates with them personally, they add that to their list. All right, so we're all good so far. Pretty straightforward process. Now, you then ask your team members to condense that list into their top 3. This is a really simple process, but I highly recommend if your team have just been dispersed, please do this. And if you're used to running a virtual team, still please do this, because what I'm going to end with should really, resonate deeply with you. So each team member now has their own top 3. And then what you ask them to do is you say, as a group now, I want you to come up with your top 4 or 5 that you all agree on. So this is important. Now, these are my top 3, and I can see at least one of them in that top 4 or 5. And the reason this is so important is what they're articulating unconsciously is their deepest held values. Now, if I call this a value exercise at the start, people come up with these kind of motherhoody statements, you know what I mean, that they see on posters on office walls. And we don't need that. What we need to understand is what's deeply held by the people that work for us, and often is completely unconscious. Now, I've done this with really big teams, and I've done this with recently with a group of senior people in a global airline group, and they kept talking about how they were all different. So we ran this exercise, and we ended up with each table of people coming up and putting a post-it note of their top 3. And by the end of the exercise, there were literally 4, maybe 5 sort of core values that were similar across this whole group of 35 people. So you will find that what you'll end up with, and this is not some value that I've come up with, this is something that resonates deeply with me. It's a really, really important exercise, and it creates a sort of level of social connection and trust and shared understanding. And usually the greatest friction I see is when people don't feel their values are being honored or replicated in the team, particularly when people are virtual, So this is a massive, massive plank in the building of trust with groups, whether virtual or live. Now, question for you. Has anyone done either a design team alliance or something similar to this values exercise? And if so, how did that go for you? I'll give you a couple of minutes just to scribble something down. All right. Yes, love how the enacted org pick is a bit like a natural world thing. It is entirely that. We are an organic system. Even though organizations are set up in buildings and we're virtual, if somebody networked the organization, it would look like that network map. So has anybody actually done a design team alliance, or has anyone done something like this values exercise? And if the answer is no, that's cool. It means that this has to happen first before you do anything else. All right, because these foundations are how all human relationships are founded, like families, sports teams, work teams, and so on and so forth. All good. I can feel people's, so not yet, not done yet. Greg, thank you very much for the honesty. Brilliant, brilliant. All right, so for everybody who's responded, thanks for your honesty, because you give me a sense of, whether this is a value. Please do this though. You'll be pleasantly surprised that in my experience, and I've been doing this a long time, the vast majority of people's values are very similar. You know, you'll always have a couple of outliers, but if you've even got 3 or 4 that the whole group agree upon, that is a phenomenal outcome. And what it means is then you've got a moral framework, both in behaviors and values, that the team agree to and the team police around and the team uphold, not you. Because if it's you, it's more like a dictatorship. Okay, right. I will continue on. Abby's done it, brilliant. Craig, just click on this. Yeah, brilliant. So Craig's done this, leadership sessions. So Abby, Craig, how has this helped you guys? I'll just, I'll be interested. Take your time typing. So Abby's used this as well, and Craig, that would be awesome. All right, so Tal wrote a book called Happier just while Craig and Abby's scribbling, and he's a brilliant guy. He's a fantastic guy. So I'll just give Craig and Abby a couple of seconds. Now then, so as I said, I'm keeping this very practical because I think in the early stages, get your foundations right. I'm thinking if you're feeling this is of value, we'll do another webinar next Thursday lunchtime, and we'll start going into a little bit more detail, right? You know, follow a bit of a process. So I'll just keep going, and when Craig and Abby have finished scribbling, I'll come back to that. So next thing I want to talk about is he says, looking at his notes, 3 simple hacks to ensure agile ceremonies remain interesting. Now, I'm very conscious in this group, we've got people who are in agile environments and people who are in non-agile environments. So for those who haven't been in an agile environment, you know, I would say that these ceremonies are a sort of series of check-ins and catch-ups to monitor progress, identify issues in the work that you're doing, build sort of competence, a learning organization, and learn from failing fast. And if anybody's got any other pearls that they want to add to that brief overview, that'd be great. So these are catch-ups, regular catch-ups. And this is going to become increasingly important when your teams are dispersed and at home. Some people will be okay at home, some people will really struggle with it. And I've definitely got a mix of that in my teams at the minute. Now, one of my kind of concerns with agile ceremonies is they tend to focus on outcomes all of the time. And there's nothing wrong with focusing on outcomes. You know, don't get me wrong, but it's also really important to ensure that connection's there as well. Now, I'm going to quickly just skip back if that's okay. Abby's responded, help to understand individual strengths and weakness and how we could best build an open foundation of communication and how we can best learn from each other. So that's brilliant. Craig, really helpful to get the team to think about the people side of leadership, which is often overlooked. It was important for them to self-realize that in order to shift the organization from command and control to more collaboration, they had to behave differently. Bloody brilliant, mate. Absolutely, absolutely, bang on. So we took it further to make it practical. The behaviors should be practiced. When we followed up with these leadership sessions, and the results were impressive. Staff engagement measures went through the roof. So that's a really important point. I've given you the tool. Then the next step, make those behaviors real. So how, and not you decide how we do that. Ask the team, how do we make sure these behaviors become normal parts of how we work? That's absolutely brilliant. Thanks. I'll move on. So that's brilliant. So in terms of the 3 simple hacks, I'm erring on, because I know that for the guys in the agile world, they'll have all of the outcome stuff really nailed down. And if you're not in an agile world, then all I would simply say is you need to, you know, focus on your priorities. What, in terms of your work, what is it you need to do today? There's always a priority each day. How are the team doing with that priority today? So one of the best questions I've ever heard is, what's really going on here? If you ask that question, you'll be amazed at the answers you get. So these are simple hacks, all right, to make it more interesting. And what that does is it makes people focus also on the context, not the content. Now, there's a great book called Ian McGilchrist called The Master and His Emissary. Turns out left brain, right brain, that sort of left brain logical, right brain creative is complete baloney. Left brain, right brain is one hemisphere focuses on detail, and at the same time, the other hemisphere focuses on big picture. We need that to operate in the world. What Ian talks about in the book is in most organizations now, we're focused on the detail, and therefore we're missing the big picture all of the time. So this question is designed, particularly in, because I've been in the Scrum world a bit, Agile leadership world, we tend to get focused on the piece of work that week, which is completely right, or the complete piece of work that sprint, completely right. But then it's also important to come up in a helicopter and look at the context. Next, another hack that I've used this week is get one of the team members to lead a 30-minute training piece. What that does is it creates a little bit of ownership and taking responsibility, which are core behaviors you want to see in your team. And it ensures somebody's status is confirmed in the group. And I'm going to come to that shortly. So team-led 30-minute training, 15-minute training on a particular topic that would help all of your team upskill. And then the final one is use humor at the start of every catch-up. It promotes oxytocin. So I think I started the last catch-up with what's the difference between a buffalo and a bison? Can't wash your hands in a buffalo. And I thought that was, particularly apt for these times. And we have this kind of kicked off a whole bunch of really, really bad jokes, just like that one. But what's oxytocin? It's a neurochemical in our brain that is critical for collaboration. It's critical for team cohesion. So humor, believe it or not, if you want to get a highly engaged, happy team, the whole point of humor and talking about your day and stuff like that is you're creating a social glue, and oxytocin is the neurochemical that's really, really critical to that. So, has anyone got any other hacks for making these regular catch-ups, I'll call them, interesting and vibrant? I'm getting quite a few responses, which is great. And I am conscious I'm asking you to type. So for those who just joined a little bit late, there's a questions box. I don't know why the chat box isn't showing up, which is a bit frustrating. So by all means, pop something in the questions box. Any hacks that you think work for you, that would be brilliant. Oh, blimey, there's loads. Right, so Carl's asked the question, what happened when you align the team and then upper management still dictate downwards? That's a whole other topic for another day, Carl, but the answer is somebody, ideally yourself or one of your leaders, needs to go and have that conversation. I'm going to be really honest, totally transparent. In Red Tech, we talk about transformation as a viral process, believe it or not, for the last couple of years. And we've said without top-down support, and peer-to-peer driven, it's going to conk out. So somebody needs to get up to the top table and start having those arguments, swinging the punches, and being honest about how that is affecting the rest of the team. Okay. Great. So Ben's little hack is once someone has spoken, then pick up the next person to go. I think that's particularly important in virtual teams because people tend to be a bit shy and quiet, and so it passes the ball, literally. So I love that. Spread your joy. Thanks, Lisa. This is a good one from Simon. I love it. Responsibility for master of ceremonies rotates, so it's hard to disengage, day after day. That is brilliant. So the master of ceremonies moves around the table. And also, if you are a really good leader, so I've asked a couple of my team to do exactly that. It should maintain the pace, maintain the momentum, maintain the focus, maintain the humor, maintain the social connection. Means everyone needs to pay attention. Totally. I love that. Okay, right. We're getting a lot of responses. Brilliant. Allow time for social interaction in virtual meetings, as it often gets overlooked. David, you get 3 gold stars and 5 bags of cheesy Wotsits. I love that. It is actually profoundly important. It's a social glue. That's the difference between a high-performing team and an average-performing team. From Martin, give people small numbers of dots they can join themselves. Each dot representing a key element of their world of work. Brilliant. Humor from Bonnie. If there's an unhappy or disengaged team, then what are your options? Private one-to-one check-in if they're okay, or just leave it and see if it's consistent. I would definitely have one-on-ones. So again, me just being totally honest, I'm a big fan of tackling so-called bad apples. Often it's bad apples are not because they're bad people. They've had bad experiences. Maybe the organization hasn't treated them well. And then some people, maybe it's time for them to move on. All right. So I think it's a great question, Bonnie. Definitely tackle it one-on-one because you don't want to embarrass people in front of the team. Again, from Marwan, brilliant. A few minutes of informality at the beginning of the session. Some think it's a waste of time, but it's critical to morale and engagement. Beautiful. Abby, get the team members to delegate who speaks next. Have 5 minutes for general chit chat. So there's some hacks there, but the bottom line is it is not your responsibility solely to keep the whole thing together. There's co-ownership and co-shared ownership, and in your behaviors and your values piece at the start, that really cements that, okay? So that you don't feel the load is on you all the time. There's enough stress and pressure to deal with without that as well. Now then, I'll just check the time. We've got about half an hour. So this is a great quote from Daniel Coyle from the Culture Code. Highly recommend the book. I may talk about a few books, you know, as we go, and I'll put together a reading list as well at some point. Successful groups realize that their greatest project is building and sustaining the group itself. If they get their own relationships right, everything else will follow. I've seen that in everything I've done professionally, everything I've studied over the last, 12 years now. Neuroscience, social cognitive neuroscience, social physics, positive psychology, behavioral psychology, and so on and so forth. We also see it in everything from Google through to the Navy SEALs. Already, how to build trust according to neuroscience. So this is David Rock's SCARF model. I don't know if everyone's seen this before. And I won't go again into detail, but this is a good framework to have in your toolkit. Remember, though, that this is just for a team. The team sits within a broader context, and maybe we'll cover that at another time. But this is a neuroscience of effective teams. So people need to be clear on status. And what that means, they know their relative importance to others. That's why everything that you've just said is a group about sharing the responsibility in catch-ups, you know, allowing people to take ownership of certain aspects. That reinforces my status is confirmed. Certainty. We have a profound need for certainty. In uncertain times, do your best to give certainty where you can. It's kind of, when I say toxic behaviors, it's because there's some level of uncertainty either in the team or in the organization. Now, bad apples in teams can create uncertainty, for example. Autonomy. Now, we're paradoxical creatures, really, so we need certainty, and yet we want autonomy. So what I would do with David's model is change this to bounded autonomy. And what I mean by that is, as leaders, we say, well, here's the flag on the hill. How are we going to get there? And that you've created a boundary, a container within which people can operate. And autonomy is a sense of control over our events. And then relatedness is a big one. This is belonging and feeling safe with others. Relatedness is something that I've now, from social cognitive neuroscience, understand is more important than food and water in our brains. And so when I see teams not go well, particularly virtual teams, there is something wrong with this area generally. That's a huge generalization, but usually the social glue isn't very strong, or there's a breakdown in relationship. And the last one is fairness. What we know is that a fair exchange with others is really important. There's a really funny video called the Capuchin monkey fairness test, where you see this little monkey who's getting cucumber in one cage, and then her friend is getting grapes in the other cage, and the little monkey getting cucumber goes completely bananas. It's very funny, but also the important thing, the important message there is that's a primate, and even primates understand the importance of fairness. So when you're looking after your team, always be aware of the importance of fairness. I think the reason why fairness is so important, it's deeply kind of connected to survival. Because if I'm not getting my fair share, then I may not survive. And I think part of what got triggered with people panic buying in the supermarkets is people grabbing their fair share, right? And then leaving others to struggle. So fairness is important to healthy teams, healthy organizations, and healthy societies. So what we do know from social cognitive neuroscience is that social loss. So if I don't have certainty, if my status has been damaged, triggers the pain network in the brain. So the pain network, so when I break my leg, the pain network's triggered. When my status is damaged or my certainty is gone, the pain network gets damaged. So it's triggered, sorry. So that is really important. It's deeply ingrained in us. We are social creatures. And so our role in this virtual kind of world that we're in at the minute is to reinforce the social bonds, but not forget the outcomes, okay? Not forget that there's still work that needs to be done. So I hope you're finding this helpful. Now, two kind of sources I could point you to. If you get the chance, look at Project Aristotle from Google, which is the piece on the left, where psychological safety. That model I've just given you, the SCARF model, helps improve psychological safety. I can go back to that at another time and go into more detail. And then Paul Zak is a neuroeconomist. A lot of his work is being used by guys like Simon Sinek, who wrote his last book, I think it was Leaders Eat Last. But Paul has proven this. He has studied oxytocin for years, 28 years, I think. And he said teams that had both high trust and high purpose blew away the competition. And oxytocin is created by high trust and a high sense of purpose. So, you know, these things always connect. So if you want a high performing team, yes, you need to get the mechanics right. Yes, you need to get the team meetings right. But please understand all this good stuff that sits underneath it. There's a difference between a high performing team and a team that just does pretty well. Okay, hope you find that useful. Now I'm just going to go to the comments again. So thanks for all the feedback, man. It's like really awesome. Fun team that helps check in protocols. We've still got more and more. Be courageous. Very, very important. Courage. Like today, this is just a complete test. I have no idea if it was going to work or not, but we're all here trying to share our expertise with each other. I may try Zoom next time, by the way, so it's easier to unmute people and see you face to face if that's not too confronting for you. Craig again. In retrospective, now retrospective is a meeting where you review the previous couple of weeks worth of work, and you'll get, in Craig's view, you're gonna get people who are quiet and the others. Giving them permission and asking questions to get them to share what they're feeling is profoundly important, releases their inner fear. This is a value around every voice must be heard. And I think I can't agree with Craig more on this. And often the people who are the quietest, I've found in my experience, have some of the most astute observations because they watch other people. Have your face camera on for any virtual meeting. Totally agree. I won't get into social physics today, but we do know that one of the most important aspects of high engagement, which is why my camera's on, is this face-to-face stuff. So brilliant, Carl. Okay, there are so many excellent. Okay, we're all good. We're all good. It's like brilliant. Okay, I'm really happy. I'm really happy. So I'll keep cracking on. There's loads and loads of comments. But if this is resonating, I'm delighted. We are all built of the same stuff. I don't care where in the world you are. I've worked in Asia for many years, in Australia, in Europe, and although there are different cultural norms, the truth is that at the heart of us are these deep-rooted aspects that come from our hunter-gatherer days. They predate language in many respects. So I'm glad you're finding these are resonating with you and your personal experience. Now, regular feedback. Why is regular feedback key to performance? So one of the things I've learned over the years is that when we set expectations, we need to be 10 times clearer about our agreed priorities. So again, this is about outcome stuff now, as you think you should be. And the reason why is because we are biased to think that everybody sees what we can see, particularly as leaders. Some great research in Harvard Business Review, they said to leaders, can people understand what their priorities are? And like 92% of leaders said, yes, they absolutely are clear. And then when they went to the people, only 2% were like, yeah, we've got no idea, you know, there's only 2% of it. 2% of us have a clue what's going on. So which is really funny, right? So just be really clear to start with, right? That's the kind of container. And then regular feedback sits within that container. So I said earlier, use candor generating practices. So we kind of do that already in the agile world. Pixar use what they call brains trusts. So let's say you do a piece of work, they'll bring other people in, like directors from other movies who've had experience, and they'll pick apart the work. So in Pixar, Ed Catmull is an amazing guy. Highly recommend you try and track Ed Catmull down from Pixar. He said every story starts terrible, and it's still terrible on a second or third iteration. So they use a brains trust. One of the team here have mentioned, might have been Simon, talking about retrospectives, which is how we've gone over the last 2 weeks. And I would say, look at the outcomes, the hard outcomes, the work, but also how we, as a team, did we stick to our behaviors? Did we stick to our values, right? So now we've got a balanced scorecard, if you want to use that term. And after action reviews, so the Navy SEALs, after they've been in action, they will land in a helicopter, put their weapons down, and immediately start talking. What worked, what didn't work? Where were you? How did that seem to you? What about this? What about that? All right, so regular key small feedback. Celebrate wins publicly. Now this is really important. Make feedback smaller, targeted, less personal, less judgmental. And then finally, highlight the cooperative, interconnected nature of the team. So Mary, that was a great piece of work you did with John. I'm delighted that you've worked so well together. Highlight that, it's really important, particularly for virtual people. Now, why? Why all of these things? Because certainty and fairness are embedded in this regular feedback process. I'm clear on where I need to head. Yes, I take it on board. I probably could have done that a little bit better. Now, I'm going to give you what I think is one of the best single phrases for giving honest feedback. I think all of us struggle with the underperforming part of the feedback process, right? So don't use the sandwich technique. It confuses people. And the sandwich technique sounds like, hiya, Mary, I think you're a really great person, but I've made this observation about your work, which wasn't really great. But, you know, overall, you're doing a wonderful job. And it just confuses people. And the thing is, they still get stuck here, even though you've got this sandwich stuff. So this is a phrase that has come from psychologists in Stanford, Yale, and Harvard. And when they use this phrase, it boosted effort and performance afterwards. All right. So we're not avoiding the hard conversation, but a simple phrase helps to give you a tool that enables performance to continue. And I'm going to give you another little tip in a second. So I'll just read it out. I'm giving you these comments because I have very high expectations, and that I know that you can reach them. All right. So this is simple but powerful. Now here's the kicker. If you haven't shown high expectations previously, kind of need to do that as a matter of priority. Now, if you've got your values aligned, you've got your team aligned, you've got your behaviors aligned, then you have these shared expectations. This becomes a no-brainer. And you could even say, I'm giving you these comments because we have a very high expectation, and I know that you can reach them. So a couple of other things. There's a coach in one of the major basketball teams when he has these more challenging conversations and uses phrases like this, he also has next to him a bowl, glass bowl, and in that bowl is slips of paper. And when he's finished, he says to the team member, I want you to grab a slip of paper. And they grab a slip of paper, and in there is a name of a bottle of wine, and he makes them go and buy a bottle of wine for them to drink later as a team. What he's really signaling there is, hey, it's just this thing, need to get it sorted, and then we move on. Don't get stuck there, don't get hung there, just move on. All right, so it's a simple phrase, but it's a powerful one. And when you're dealing with difficult stuff, always stick to the facts. Always stick to the facts and not interpretation. Okay, now with virtual teams, it becomes more challenging. That's why, as was said earlier, seeing each other face to face on camera is important. So then you can read body language, which is vital to these kinds of conversations. All right, how are we all doing? We all good. Still, everybody's still here, which is a good sign. Let's have a look. All right, so Simon's got some points. So remote working, if a team discovers asynchronous working methods, okay, can lead to more opportunities to contribute for introverts than working in person. So you can get teams working in a kind of leapfrog manner, and that helps to encourage people. I'm assuming that's what you meant, Simon. Correct me if I've got that wrong. I do think, though, that the more quieter, introverted people, there are pearls there. So working a little bit harder to draw them out, putting them in teams where they'll naturally draw that wisdom out is profoundly important. So completely see. Yeah, can't see the comments being made. Unfortunately, I'm the only one who can see the comments being made. I'll try and use Zoom next time. So thanks for that, Pratik. Right, good question from Carl. Is there a model we can use to explain the difference between candor and brutal honesty? That's a really good question. So candor for me is, here are my observations. That's it. Here are my observations. There's no emotional charge attached to that. Now I've used this, I even use this with my wife, right? So can I just make a couple of observations is often how I'll start. And although people naturally go on the defensive, hey, it's not an easy conversation, so you just have to be at peace with the fact that somebody's going to be slightly on the defensive. But if you use that phrase about high expectations, that will drop that down a bit. If you've done the behaviors and values piece, that will drop that defensive down, but it's got to be there. Brutal honesty, and the best way to describe that is honesty without compassion is cruelty. Now, I have a person in my life who feels it is her job to point things out. I just want to point something out. And it's done without any compassion whatsoever. And what it does is an enormous amount of damage, like a hand grenade going off in a room. So it's a really important question, Carl. And the answer is you have to use your instincts, and you have to use your understanding of that person. The best way to describe it really is kind of a way of making your observations known, so you're not avoiding the tough stuff, but you're not delivering it in a way where you would damage the person or damage your relationship. Brutal honesty means that somebody gets hurt. Now, I can't help it if somebody, even when I'm just using candor, making observations, if they're a bit annoyed. That's okay, perfectly normal and natural. Totally understand where you're coming from. Now, funny enough, I had this conversation yesterday, and the person I was talking to, who's phenomenal, was like, you know, are you kicking me ass? I went, no, that's your interpretation. This is our expectations. This is how I would prefer you did it next time. Simple as that. We okay with that? Great, popping on it. So I think that I trust your instincts, and you have to trust yours too. Here are my observations. It's very different to brutal honesty, where there's emotional charge attached to it. One is unemotional, one is emotional. That's my best answer. If anyone's got any other tips, could you throw them in, please? That would be really brilliant. I'm going to keep going just so honor the promise I made in the infographic in the video and get through the content. But that's a brilliant question. I'm so glad we answered it. Now, this is something from Atlassian. It's not one of mine. One fast way to get total honesty on how well a project is running. So we can score our projects with dot points and say, yeah, I want to focus on this area or this area and blah, blah, blah. But do we honestly know, particularly with virtual teams, that they're all happy, that they all agree that you may think, oh, things are going really well. So Atlassian have got something really simple, and I loved it. It was really funny, made me laugh. And Pixar use a form of this as well, and it goes something like this. Everybody needs to close their eyes, and you say, right, our last 2 weeks, I want you to vote on the last 2 weeks. Do you think it went well? Do you think it was average? Or do you think there's room for improvement? Right? Now, everybody has to do it with their eyes closed. So you get them to close their eyes, and you go 1, 2, 3, close your eyes, vote. Right, everybody open your eyes. Now, you're going to get maybe 3 people like that, 1 person like that, and 2 people like that. And the reason that's brilliant and simple is because it allows a conversation to happen. Right, John, why do you not think it's going so well? And it'll unearth stuff that you didn't know about. You don't need to use this very often. I think the odd retrospective. If your gut tells you that something's not right, use this because it'll often unearth stuff that you go, you know what, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. My general experience is that most of us actually know when something's not on track. We can feel it instinctively. And this is just a really simple method of making that visible. Okay, dead simple, dead easy. Now I'll just go back to the comments. All good, we're happy, awesome, brilliant. Okay, so Simon's asked about an experiment where, so the guy called, all right, so this is an important one. So Simon, I love this question. So it's about a teacher. It's actually about a psychologist called Jim Rosenthal. And Rosenthal did something really interesting. He went into a big school in Chicago, I think it was. And he said to the teachers, I'm going to take all of your kids through a battery of psychological tests. And then after he'd done all of those tests, he went to the teachers and he said, I've identified all the high performers in your team. He called them the fast flourishers or something like that. And he gave the first teacher, I'll just call her Mary, these are your fast flourishing kids. John, these are your 5. Jane, these are your 3. Dominic, these are your 2. And so each teacher ended up with a little group of fast flourishers that had been identified by Rosenthal's work. Anyway, he went back a year later, and sure enough, you know, Mary's 3 and John's 2, they were way ahead of their teams. And then Jim Rosenthal got all of the teachers together, and he said, so I need to be honest about the experiment. There are no fast flourishers. I completely made it up. I just randomly picked names out of your class roster. And so these kids were no more fast flourishing than their peers. The only difference between their performance and their peers' performance is how you treated them. It's a really important experiment. Now, I'm not saying that means that we don't often have difficult people in our teams, but what Simon is trying to point out, and I'm kind of articulating his point, is that we have an infinite capacity to do extraordinary things. And what we tend to do is judge people at face value. Often organizations don't treat their people very well. And so some people come to us in our teams with baggage. Sometimes you can help them, sometimes you can't. But what I can tell you is that another psychologist did tests with kids that had been done with NASA on creativity to see how creative NASA engineers were. I think only about 5 or 6% of NASA engineers were genius level at creativity. This psychologist was able to adapt the test very slightly for 5-year-olds and found 98% of them scored genius level for creativity. But by the time they were 16, it dropped to 12%. So this innate stuff that I'm talking about, these fundamentals, and what Simon's pointing out here as well, they're all true in your teams, okay? But I'm not saying that you don't have difficult people. I'm not saying that there won't be people who are going to come on the journey. What I am saying though is that if you get this right, the teams can do extraordinary things. So, okay, got lots and lots of, yeah, problem with brutal honesty is brutal. Playing games can improve cooperation, totally agree. And then there's a Spotify squad health check. Did I nick, was it from Spotify or Atlassian? You let me know. Anyway, I'll keep going. So we're close to time, about 7 minutes left, and I'm on track, which is good. So one massive lesson from the science of goal setting. Now, I've built big businesses, and I didn't know this stuff, but I've been studying these areas of psychology for, blimey, 12 years now, and science, because I realized the difference between my really successful veterinary practices and average successful veterinary practices was how the practice owner, the vet, operated, and how she or he operated had a massive difference on. So we started codifying that, and also I burned out. So a lot of the stuff I'm trying to share with you is because I've burned out so badly in between those two businesses. I wanted to know the scientific proof of how you can maintain really great levels of performance without killing yourself. And the science brought me to where we are today. Now, this is a biggie. One massive lesson. So again, this is research that was done. And the big lesson about setting goals is when you start to visualize the obstacles that will get in the way of achieving your goals, you are firstly more likely to achieve the goal. Secondly, more likely to enjoy the process of getting to that goal. And thirdly, more likely to maintain your morale and your focus. And then finally, it increases your resilience, which, like other parts of us, is a muscle that needs to be practiced. So if you, over the next sort of, let's say we're in this kind of lockdown for 6 to 8 weeks, set some kind of flag on the hill for your teams. Really important. This is our purpose. This is what we're going to do. And then go, right, what's going to get in the way? And the moment you do that, what you're doing is you're taking a kind of really grounded, practical look at the challenges that are inevitable as soon as you set any goal. Now, in the research, they looked at students revising for their examinations, degrees, and stuff like that. And they found that those who visualized the obstacles, like can't get the book out of the library, couldn't get study time, get distracted and stuff like that, not only did they do better in the exams, they actually enjoyed the process of revising and that kind of thing better. So it's a simple hack, but it's profoundly important. And I would suggest, if you can, to send your people to some kind of flag on the hill. Let's get some collective energy around doing something wonderful. So please do that. So see the obstacles and put them in black and white. And then we go, right, how are we going to get around that? How are we going to overcome that? What's your ideas? What do you think we should do? Right? And what you'll get is you'll get energy. Resilience is a whole other topic. I will talk about grit resilience another day. Okay, last couple of slides. Okay, loads and loads of comments. Abby's using lean coffee meeting structures to do this. This is great. It's like the Hawthorne experiment. Yeah, absolutely. Keep going. Right, Miro, a tool for shared visualizations, is like a virtual whiteboard. So thanks for that. It's much better than a real whiteboard. Totally agree. I think use icons and clip art, stuff like that. We do have a couple of virtual tools. I think maybe that's another session. Great tools to get virtual team working going. There'll be so many ideas. Now, I want to finish on cadence, if that's okay with everyone. So leancoffeetable.com for the lean coffee stuff. That's from Abby and from Simon. So thanks for that. Cadence. What do I mean by that? Rhythm. How often? It's a normal question. How often should I be running these meetings? Now, we run a coffee catch up at 10 o'clock every day, me and the team. Why? Just to talk, just to have that social connection. Do we talk about business? Yeah, absolutely. But it doesn't start like that. We'll talk about how you're doing, how you're finding things, and then we'll get into business. Now, many of you already said you do that, but I would ensure that that's happening on a daily basis, particularly with people who are not used to remote working. I've been remote working now for 15, 16 years. But for a lot of people, this is a whole new world, and loneliness is a problem. Okay, so this overcomes that. Retrospectives are going to be slightly controversial. Depends on the volume of work in that sprint, but maybe there's an argument for going weekly rather than fortnightly. I don't know. For me, with my team, I do weekly, and it's mainly just to stay close to them, because you don't have the visual input you would normally have if they were co-located. You don't have the sort of sense of how people's energy levels are, the whiteboards in the office. If you're not in an agile environment, you're not seeing the chat anymore. So you don't have that sort of input, which actually informs a lot of how you operate. So that's completely open to you. And cadence, by the way, this is your choice. I'm just throwing a couple of things in. I always do a Monday check-in. That is partly, hi, how are you? But mainly it's to do with, okay, what are we focused on this week? So that's much more outcomes driven. Thinking in reflection time. Henry Ford said, thinking is the hardest thing that people do. That's why few people do it. What I would strongly suggest, now that people don't have distraction in the office, now that people are getting through their work quicker because they've got what I would call deep work time, then use some of that time to think. Bring them, remember, as I said, our brain works big picture and detail at the same time. So use this thinking and reflection time to look at your context. So I'll look at RadTech. We do online live learning, live in-person learning, certified Scrum courses, safe course, that kind of stuff. We do virtual coaching and consulting, live in-person coaching. So all that is brilliant. But then I look outside of that and I ask, what business are we in? And there are a couple of answers. One of those answers is we're in the business of scalable behavioral change. Oh, okay. Well, if we're in that business, then what does that mean for our organization? Should we be creating a whole suite of tools and blah, blah, blah? And then you start coming with hypotheses, right? So in the entrepreneurial world, we come up with a little test and we throw it out to the world and get some kind of feedback. So thinking and reflection time, really, really important. So that is pretty much it. Where are we? Bang on, by gosh, 1:30. I know I've given us an extra 10 or 15 minutes because I wanted to sort of ask one really important question. So first one first, though, before that. What cadence is working for you? What cadence is working for you? Any tips for everybody in this group? Give that a couple of seconds and people typing furiously. Okay. Right, Miro. Twice to forget. Need to disappear, no problem, totally understand. That's why I try and keep on speed. Got a good couple of practical things. Brilliant, man, I'm delighted. Brilliant. People have to head off, no problem. 2 weeks, great. Twice weekly. Got to get some food. All right, lovely people. I'm going to send an email out with the recording and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to ask you what you would like to cover next. So if you would like some kind of system of kind of, right, can we cover this next and then this, or go into more detail in this area, or we're not discussing something, can we throw this topic in? And we'll definitely do that. If you've got any questions, then that's my email address, alan.furlong@radtech.com. I'm more than happy for people to email me directly. I'll send out the videos, as I said, tomorrow. We'll do another one of these next week because it seems to have been really well received. And I'll pick the topic based on the answers to your questions. So if you say, look, Alan, we want to cover, I don't know, innovation, or we want to cover resilience, or we want to cover more detail on high performance in team specifically, whatever it happens to be, just let me know, and I'll put something together and get it out to you. So we've got your email addresses through GoToWebinar, which is great, so we can email you through there. And if you need anything though, let me know. And just look after each other, okay? Stay safe, be well. I'm so deeply grateful that everybody came to this test, and I wish you all nothing but success, and I'll see you next Thursday. So see you later, and take care. Bye-bye.